investing yourself in some of the
Hey, remember who I am? Oh, I'm Jeff. Oh, thank you. Sometimes I bring this along in case I like air conditioning. When my arms get cold, I put this on. Feels good though, the air.
they probably are.
We're gonna
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know there's one or two still coming in, and maybe there are some others who will be coming in. My name is Martha Renfro, and I'm I guess the director by default of Lost Skills. And Lost Skills
People write multiple books, and oftentimes even all of those books will bring out numerous things that other books and other experts have missed. And so you can get lost in a world of survival. You can get lost in a world of disaster preparedness. You can think of thousands of various things that could happen. And I don't want to overwhelm anybody. In reality, all I want to do is just help you to think in regards to how to deal with those situations before they happen. And so we're going to do some questions here real quick. I want to kind of test you guys. See what it is that you can think of, because in reality, if you're not thinking, you're dead. It's not any more complicated than that. I was looking for my little clicker thing, but I guess I don't have it, so I'll just have to press the button on my laptop. But all right. So who here's ready? Exactly. Right? That's it. For what? You know, that's the legitimate question, because the what is what we don't know. We really don't know what. It could be anything. So what are some of the types of emergencies that you can think of just off the top of your head? Give me something. What are you thinking of?
An EMP.
Why did you pick that one? That's actually going to be our focus today. Yeah, so we're going to end up talking about EMPs the most, because that particular disaster includes most of the other protocols of other disasters plus some. So it actually, that type of scenario includes a vast majority of the other types of scenarios under that umbrella. So we will be talking about EMP as the example today. Any others? Yes. So grid, right? Grid down. Yeah, meltdowns, grids downs. Cyber attacks, we've found that you don't actually have to have a power plant mess up. All you have to do is attack its system, and you can actually shut down an entire city's grid remotely from a different country, covering your tracks with IP, right? So it's been done. Multiple attacks from various countries have happened. So yes, that's a thing. It's amazing. We're more interconnected than ever before with the web, but it also gives us significantly more vulnerabilities. The more dependent we become upon this interconnectedness, the more vulnerabilities we also have when things go down. Anything else?
Tornado.
All right, natural disasters. Yeah, tornadoes. We don't have to deal with hurricanes here, right? We're glad about that. But we get tornadoes here. We get big storms here. We get blizzards here. And I think we're even susceptible to small earthquakes. So, yeah, we get almost the whole gamut, right? And while it may not be a big hurricane or a tropical storm, the lakes here can produce quite some nasty stuff too, large bodies of water, and anything else that you can think of. Here's what I got, all right? Grid down, we already discussed those. Storms of, obviously, earthquakes, tornadoes, fires, right? They can happen, right? We've seen fires happen all over the country, some natural, some started. Houses burnt down, infrastructure, number of different things. How about this one? Does anybody ever think that was ever going to happen? Yeah? So is it possible that that type of scenario repeats itself? If it happened once, it can happen again, right? And it can happen worse. Here's the thing, when you're preparing for a disaster, what you do is you prepare for the worst, right? You assume those types of things, but then you live as if nothing's going to happen. But you have to have at least this background understanding that it could. We don't want you to live paranoid. That's not going to help you, right? Living paranoid is not going to help you, right? And always worrying about the future. Oh, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? That's out of your control. Stop worrying about it. All right, but what you can do is you can make sure that you have set yourself up to be able to handle the vast majority of things when they do happen. So, a civil unrest, right? And civil unrest can be a result. It's a byproduct oftentimes of these things happening, right? And obviously civil unrest can be a thing in and of itself. Political problems, right? You don't need any of these types of things to be the starting point for civil unrest, they can happen all on their own. But the thing is, if some of these do happen, they can also lead to civil unrest is just always looming. And especially in the climate today, we understand that, it doesn't matter what aisle you're on. When it happens, no one's going to come checking what your party affiliation is. All right? So it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant once it happens. Okay? Because it's everybody for themselves, everybody just trying to make it by. All right? So, super important question. What's more important? Gear or your mental state? All right? What do you always have with you? Unless you're always wearing my knife. Which I don't always wear it, because there's places I can't walk with this, right? I can't come to church with this, or they would look at me weird, right? I can't go into banks with this, post office, things like that. What do you always have with you? Yourself. You have yourself. And you yourself are very capable of a number of things, but you have to also train and prepare for it. Yes?
Wherever you are, that's where you are.
Exactly. Right? Does it get any more simple than that? But the problem is that we can also become dependent on things. Right? So in a few weeks, we're going to do a class on shelter building primarily, but it's because when I do wilderness survival, we really can't cover everything within 6 hours. It's impossible. It takes us 4 hours just to do shelter building because I don't want you to learn just the theory of it. We're going to practice it. You're going to build your own shelters, so please come. And you're going to be graded on them. I'm going to teach you how, you're going to build it, and then you're going to be graded on it. All right? So it's really, really going to help you because it's going to help point out all of the things that you should learn to look for when you do those types of things. We're also going to do fire starting without matches or lighters or things of that nature. And then we're going to do basic kits. We're going to focus primarily on different types of tools, shovels, blades, saws, things of that nature, especially in regards to shelter building. We can't focus on everything. Remember, time is limited. We don't want to overwhelm people. So your mental state is important. It's vital. Why? Because if you don't know what you're supposed to do, what is your mental state going to be? Stress. Panic, stress, anxiety, right? And if you guys know yourselves to any degree, what is your decision-making process when you're freaking out? Probably not the best, right? Now, tools and items can bring a certain level of comfort. Knowing that you have certain things already prepared beforehand can bring a certain level of ease. However, if you don't know how to use them, and when stuff happens, right, and you either don't have access to them, or even if you do have access to them, when you freak out, who cares about that stuff if you've never practiced using it? Right? Matches are great. We all know how to use matches until it's raining. Until we're in the winter and we start striking a match and we're under a tree and it lights a fire and the snow falls off the branches into the fire and puts out the fire we just started with our matches that were trembling like this, and we can't light another one because we're freezing. We're hypothermic. We fell into a river. There's so many things that if you don't think about, you don't think about. And that's the thing, is you have to understand that your mental state, your preparedness, your understanding of various scenarios, and that includes practicing, is extremely important. And things are important too. But here's the thing. I had an option today to give you lists of various things that you should buy for various types of kits, for various types of scenarios, right? For your home, for your car, for yourself, all that kinds of stuff. But you know what the number one problem with all of that is? Money. And quite frankly, I'm not of the opinion that many people have a whole lot to spend these days. And so if everything is dependent upon money, then you're going to end up stressing every more. Well, I can't buy that knife. I can't buy that flashlight. I can't buy that sleeping bag. I can't buy that, solar kit. That's $3,000. Or I can't buy that generator. Okay. So what are other things that you can do with the stuff that you already have? Because if you understand how to survive, if you already prepare yourself beforehand, you'll find that you have more things in your house that can be utilized than you previously thought. And so mental state trumps gear, but gear is also important too. All right, I'm going to compare two types of survival. We have wilderness survival, and then we have just general disaster preparedness in regards to what we were talking about at the beginning when I was asking you the questions, right? We had tornadoes, we had earthquakes, we had fires, we had civil unrest, we had EMPs, we had all these kinds of things. Those aren't traditional survival things. But I want to show you that there's a relationship between the two. So in traditional survival, wilderness survival that is, there are 4 elements that we consider, right? Especially when you ever do military training of that nature, this is what they tell you. These are the 4 things that you need. These are the priorities. Psychology is a given, right? Your mental state is a given. I'm not including that, all right? Because if you freak out, you die. You panic, you die. That's just the way that it is. Shelter, water, fire, food. You need to remember those 4 things in that order. Shelter is your primary thing. It's your priority in a survival situation, right? Well, let me back up. Always have to remind you, your first priority is get your wits about you. That's your first priority, get your wits about you. Number 2, shelter. Find it or build it. Find a place where you can build it, all right? Then is water, then is fire, and lastly is food, because that's the thing you can survive the longest without, right? Water, 3 days, they say, all right? Sometimes 4. But for food, you can go up to 3 weeks. Now, if you're being active, obviously that's diminished, right? If you have to hike long distances and depending on the situation, your body type and all that kinds of stuff. But what you have is, you have 3 minutes for air, right? You have 3 days for water, and you have 3 weeks for food. But chances are 3 weeks for food could be a stretch in some situations, but that's what they say. And so we're going to focus primarily on shelter because that's a priority. And then, of course, I'll show you guys some different water filters. And there are some methods of water filtration if you don't have a filter that you can do, right? You have different forms of distillation that you can create. You can create a solar still. You can create a filter with sand and rock and different types of things. You can use charcoal from a fire. There's various ways that you can create your own filters. And there's one thing that you will find in abundance almost anywhere you go, even on the most remote island, and that is plastics. You will find water bottles in almost any place you end up, unless you're in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Then you're out of luck, and it doesn't matter if you had a bottle there anyway. You can only put sand in it. All right. Now, disaster preparedness includes the same elements of survival, wilderness survival, but in a slightly different context. So we still have the same things, because everybody, whether you're in a wilderness situation or survival situation, whether you're in normal life, there's something that you need. And what is that? Shelter. Everybody needs shelter. Anybody going home tonight? I hope so, right? Right? Water, fire, but in this case, it's not just typical fire, it's also energy. Right? In a disaster type of situation, we need to know what are alternative sources of energy. Sources for heat, sources for comfort, sources for light, sources for powering things, right? Food, of course, we need food. Security is the new addition, right? Because now we're introducing civil unrest. Now, you could argue that in a wilderness situation, you might have a bear or a wolf or something like that. That's understandable, okay? But it's very different than when you have mobs. All right? Mobs that are specifically looking for things that they do not have that you just might. Right? And you may not be with a group of people, you may be by yourself. And here's the thing. You may not be able to trust animals, but in many cases you can trust them more than people. And you can surely predict them better than people. All right? You can understand simple animal behavior so much more than you can understand complex human behavior, especially when they come in groups. It is very, very difficult to deal with people who are after what you got. All right? So security becomes a really big thing, especially if you have family that you want to protect, right? Medicine, all right? That's also something that you can consider, but if you know medicinal plants in a survival situation. But now we're talking about a very different environment where we're more prone to different bacteria. In the wilderness, you've got giardia in the water and things like that. Infections. You're wet for too long or something like that. But in civilized environments, we have so much more exposure to things that can make us sick. Case in point, a pandemic, right? So you have access to germs and viruses and other things like that you don't have access to in a wilderness situation. So medicine becomes extremely more important in this types of situation. Electrical shock, burns, glass breaking, accidents, vehicles, bikes, any type of mobility things, falling from things, attacks, stab wounds, blunt force wounds, all these types of things that could happen. And I'm not trying to scare you. You guys understand that this is just going through various possibilities, right? The likelihood, that's really for you to begin to determine within your own situation. But what is one thing that we always don't do? Panic, right? I'm hoping that this doesn't backfire. The more I tell you not to panic, you end up panicking more. I don't know. I hope that's not the case. All right, hygiene is another one, right? Hygiene, okay? Hygiene is extremely important, especially if you have to shelter in place and you're in or in your car or whatever it is and you're with other people. Hygiene becomes more and more important because the more contact you have, right, with other people, the more prone you are to catching something or passing on something or other things of that nature. And when you're in enclosed spaces, it's very different than when you're outside. You can be outside for months and just dip yourself in the river and hygiene is fairly okay, but you're in an enclosed space, sleeping in the same spot, using the restroom and whatever, it becomes really problematic, all right? And then money, something that you don't need in the wilderness, all right, is money. Money, fungibility. What are certain things that you can exchange for, right, that are fungible? You guys know what fungibility is, right? Just something that is easily exchanged. So we say things like gold, you should invest in gold. Well, how good is gold when you're trying to trade for a morsel of food and you got a block? You can't chip off a little piece and hand it. So the fungibility of certain things is not necessarily good. Cash is good because you have various denominations of cash. You can give $1 bills, $5 bills, $10 bills, depending on what it is that you're trying to exchange for. So smaller things, right, are generally more fungible that you can, in my conversations over the years with some of my Army buddies, and I'm not in the Army, but I've had a lot of military friends. I've worked with military. A lot of my military friends, and especially SEER and Special Forces, Special Operations, they all said that the currency of the future is water, bullets, and heirloom seeds, right? So he says, stock up on those, right? Water is for obvious reason. Heirloom seeds is not as obvious to many people, but here's the thing. Most of our food, our processed food, is done on massive industrial farms. And the way that they work is they use GMOs. And you cannot replant GMOs. It's one-time use only. So you have to rebuy your seeds every year, and you have to buy their additives, right? And there's a series of them. They're pesticides, they're fungicides, and all of that kinds of stuff. And they don't grow, or they don't grow anywhere near as well without those things. So it's not like you can just take them and plant them in your backyard. So when you run out of food, and believe me, you're going to need food, and you can't go to the stores to get food, do you have a garden, right? And the best way to have a garden is with heirloom, non-hybridized, non-GMO seeds. And because other people will be looking to plant food, they're going to want those seeds. Now, if you have a garden, you can take the seeds from your tomatoes and from your cucumbers and all that kinds of stuff. But having a freezer with all of those things, just a bag of various different vegetables and fruits and herbs, medicinal herbs and things like that, just get a box of 100 varieties. It doesn't take up that much space. But that also is going to be a currency. Why? Because people need to eat. And you'll be surprised what can happen in some pretty bad situations. Bullets I don't normally recommend, and here's the why. Because if you use bullets as a means of exchange, you're giving somebody the option to shoot you with them. So that's a little tricky in my mind, because it's kind of like, who am I empowering, right? And so it's just, just use some common sense, and you have to use your own judgment. And every situation is different. And like I said, if you sit there and try to plan out every situation, you're going to be there forever and you're never going to figure out, because the world is infinitely variable. But there are certain things, generalities, that we can start with. So here's a risk assessment that I want you guys to go through. All right? The first step in anything is just assessing where you are currently in regards to any form of risk. That's the starting point. All right? What is my risk score? What is my house's risk score, my family's risk score, my vehicle's risk score? Just ask those questions, all right? Walk through your home, right? And these printouts will be given to you guys, and I have a few more things to hand out to you. So you need to walk through your own home, all right? I know you do that all the time, but have you ever done it with the lights off and your eyes blindfolded? Oh, right? There's an activity. All right, I'm going to send you guys to the hospital tonight. Take an inventory of things. As you walk through your home, take an inventory of the things that you have that might be useful and also where they are. Because when things happen, you don't want to be scrambling, where was that? Where did I put that again? Did somebody take it? I swear I had some of that. Where is it? Like, you don't want to be in that situation. You want to know where the things that you need are. You want them to be accessible because time is important, especially in if there is a situation where you have to leave your home quickly, right? Or you have to get to the basement quickly because a tornado is coming, but you don't have everything that you need in the basement, whatever it may be. I'm just giving you hypotheticals here. It's good to know where your things are and that you know that you have them and enough of them, especially like batteries. Right? Oh, I know that I bought a pack of batteries. Oh, there's only 2 left. Oh, who used the other ones? Oh, that was the remote, TV remote. Okay. You don't want to find yourself in that type of situation. So taking an inventory of the things that you have and making a checklist of the things that are most important. All right? And here's the thing. You want to be able to practice with your family certain things. When stuff happens, what is going to be your initial response? Like, let's just say it's not even a disaster, but a pipe breaks. Do you know where the water shutoff is for your home? Right? Kitchen fire. Do you have a fire extinguisher? Is it a chemical fire? Do you want to put, what type of fire extinguisher is it? You have to understand that just there's some basics that you should know even if a disaster never happens. But you live in a real world where stuff happens, like they break, right? Gas leak could happen in anybody's home. You don't need a disaster for that, right? You can end up leaving the beans cooking for too long, right? There's things that you can do, right? You leave the iron on, right? It's next to a curtain, or I don't know. I'm just saying these are simple stuff that happen all the time, all day long. Do you know, right, where your fire extinguishers are? Do you have any? Do you know how to turn the water off? Do you know how to turn the power off to your house? Do you know where the breaker switch is? Can you immediately go to the breaker switch and turn it off if you need it off, right? Someone's being electrocuted, right? They just stuck a knife in an outlet or something, right? You don't want to touch them, right? I mean, you can take a blanket, put it around, and pull them away, but I'm just saying, you understand, right? There's things that you need to be aware of. Go through these scenarios, and you don't have to go through them all, but say, kids, if mommy and daddy aren't home, this is where the water shutoff valve is. Okay, this is where our fire extinguisher is. This is where our first aid kit is. If you hear, sirens, and I don't even know if they have sirens in every town, but, you run to the basement, all right, go into this room. Practice going through various things so that when things happen, you're not like, God forbid you lose your earpiece. All right. Make provisions. As you go through these, you'll realize where areas you're lacking in, and you'll figure out how can I build within those particular areas, all right? So you need to make provisions, and of course, don't freak out, all right? Shelter. We're going to go through a few of these. We're going to break down each of these 8 items, all right? So we're going to go through shelter, water, fire, food, right? And then the 4 additives that we added for disaster preparedness. But now we're going to go through shelter, not in a survival situation per se, but in a disaster situation. So what are the various types of shelter? All right? I want you guys just to think. I don't want to give you answers to things. I don't want to just give you a list of stuff. I want you guys to begin processing through these. All right, what are my different forms of shelter in as many types of things that I can think of? Basement. Yeah. Tent. What else? Cars. Cars are your shelter. Yes, absolutely. Cars can be a very long-term shelter. If you got to leave your house, that's one of the best roofs you can have, right? You're enclosed from the elements primarily, right? I mean, ventilation can become a problem. You'll see your car gets musty quick, but, everything has its pros and cons. right? Your house, right? What else? Yeah, all of those things, right? So we have various forms of shelters, all right? And they fall under different brackets. And you can turn things into shelters too. You know, I think that humans are superbly creative. But you have to be able to think, because that's when your creativity comes. And so what are the different roles of the shelter? You need to say, okay, what am I using these various shelters for? All right? You need to check whether it's accessible. Now, obviously, the best shelter you have is your house. But what if something happens when you're not home and you can't get home? Then that is no longer your shelter of choice if it's inaccessible. What if your neighborhood gets shut down? Right? What if it burns down? Right? All of these things. What if I can't get to my home is a question. Then what are my backup forms of shelter? What am I capable of? Well, your car is generally your first, right, if you're not home. But what if you're with a friend? And they've got their car, and they've got to go help their family, and you're just like, I'm sorry, good luck. Hopefully that's not the case, and they're not your friends. Don't sell them the bullets. All right? All right? Entry, exit. All right? If you have a shelter, what are the ways that you can get into your shelter, and what are the ways you can get out of your shelter? There's times where you need to know how to get out of your house, whether that's a fire, whether that's a flood, whether that somebody is trying to rob your house, right? They're coming into your house. You need to know, well, you should know it better than they do, right? So you should know, how can I get out of my house? If I don't have access to my first floor and on my second floor, how do I get out of my second floor? Which window is the closest to the tree that I can jump to and grab onto a branch? I don't know. I'm just, what is the shape of your house? Can I get from the second floor to the roof of the first floor? Is there an area where I can do that? You need to know these things. Right? Is there a pile of hay that I can jump into? Probably not. It's not a movie. It'd be nice if you had like a nice little, bundle of hay. You just do a flip and land in there. Oh, I'm okay. Right? You can get a score. Yeah. Yo, man, that was good. I'm not going to rob you, man. You've got some gymnastics skills. I need to plug this in. Let's see if I can. It's not going to reach. See, I was unprepared. I didn't check my battery before I came here. All right. Entry, exits, maintenance, right? Obviously, you have to maintain your shelter, and especially when you are in a wilderness survival situation, this becomes very necessary because these types of shelters, like the one in the picture, they're not built to last. Relation to other survival needs, like does your shelter provide you access to any of the other things that you need? Like if you're in your home, yeah, you're probably going to have some dried foods, right? Some canned foods, something that you can eat for a while to keep you alive. Maybe, you've got water, but, we're going to talk about water in just a second. But some of these things overlap, all right? Here we are with water. What are you on? Are you on public water? Well, spring, water catchment, stream, etc. Because here's the thing. If you're on public water, if you're on city water, and the grid goes down, don't touch your water. You've got to filter it. All right? Because the city's water they don't take fresh spring mountain water and pipe it to your house. They're taking treated water. And grid down means treatment ain't working. You understand that, right? And you guys know what goes in, what type of water they take, right? All right? It's sewage. It's sewage. All right? So you've got hormones in there. You've got feces in there. You've got all types of goodies in there. Okay? So I'm not trying to be gruesome. I'm just saying that's what's in the water. In the treatment facilities, they treat it. We don't even normally recommend you drink tap water. You should filter even tap water before you drink it. But here in a survival situation, it becomes ever more so important because if you have a medical emergency now caused by the water that you're using, that puts you at double the problem. Why? You understand? So these are things that you have to understand. Are you on a well? Right? Are you on a spring and all that kinds of stuff? How about storage? Are you storing water I'm just always going to depend on the fact that I can turn the faucet and it'll be there? Or do you have various forms of storage? Are they metal containers? Are they glass containers? Are they BPA-free plastic containers? Are they large? Are they small? Are they whatever? Like These are things to take into account. And here's the thing. I'm giving you these options, but like I said, even if you haven't prepared all of this stuff, and I don't have the best water containers, just have a water container. Okay, I can't afford to buy the 5-gallon BPA-free, food grade, plastic drum. But I've got these old, free gallons, whatever. Just fill those up and leave them there. Why? Because in a survival situation, you could care less. If you have water, that's a godsend, right? So that's the thing, is we think about these things so that we can make provision and be creative with what we have and not panic about the things that we don't have and the things that we can't do. It's about what you can do. All right? Water transportation. If you have to leave, right? You have to know, what can you do? Water filtration, of course, super important. And there's various types. In my backpack, I always carry a bunch of goodies. I've got flashlights, headlamps, military water filter with a few separate filters that I can replace in case, and it's got a little straw as well that attaches to it that I can drink straight out of a river, right? Or any other type of water source. I've had this for plus 15 years now, so I don't know if it's still good. I'll find out when the emergency happens, right? I've got a headlamp in here that's really cool. You turn it on and it goes up, and you go down, and it lowers the power. So it's hands-free, right? So I don't got to touch it. Sorry, I didn't mean to blind you guys. Then, of course, I've got my little handy-dandy multi-tool and other types of things.
Where'd you get that water filter?
You know what? I don't remember because it was 15 years ago. It was before Amazon was a thing.
Well, where can you get a water?
Oh, you can get these anywhere. Survival stores, you can get them. You can get almost anything on Amazon these days. So this is just, let's see, let me give you the brand name. You can tell this bag is old. I can't even read it through the plastic anymore. It's so aged. This is Aquamira Frontier Pro. So they probably still make them. This was an old military issue type of water filtration that's just kind of small, compact that you can use. Obviously, you have your camping ones that are a little bit more sophisticated. They attach to your Nalgene bottles. You guys know what a Nalgene bottle is, right? Yeah. And then you have your larger filtrations. I have a Berkey at home, which is kind of like it's a carbon filter in like a metal container. And the reason that I like those is because I can take it with me. When you have a water filtration system that is attached to your faucets, it's convenient, but switching them is more expensive. Maintaining them is more expensive, and if you want to take it with you, you can't. Right? So this is, you can actually move with it. Obviously, it's not extremely movable, right? But it's doable. All right, fire, energy. All right, on grid, off grid. What is your energy sources? I would imagine that most of us are on grid, right? But do you have anything that should you be temporarily without access to grid? And so, having backup generators, different fuels, batteries, are they charged? Are they rechargeable? Do you have a charger? Those kinds of things. Signal, GPS, comms, I put that under energy as well. It's just, anything that's battery powered, I kind of just threw under there because I don't want to make things too complicated. And then obviously you have your stove, your fireplace, your heating, your cooking. There's a lot. And I'm making a list of things just not because I want you to remember all of this, and not because I'm trying to tire you, but I'm trying to show you that there's a lot of options. And all you have to do is just take a minute, consider them, and you'll come up with stuff. I mean, you can make your own stove. If you didn't buy a camping stove, you don't have whatever, you can make your own stove out of a can. And if you guys can find Coke cans, yeah, you can find Coke cans anywhere, all right? Just any aluminum can. Just go outside, walk 5 feet, and you'll find one somewhere. Take it and put any form of alcohol in it. Just cut the top, cut the bottom, put them together with alcohol, poke some holes in it, light it. The alcohol fumes coming through those holes will just give you a small stove that you can heat water on, boil water on, things like that. There's just things to do that you guys know alcohol burns, right? You can do it with gasoline, but alcohol is better because you don't want to mess with gasoline in your hands, and it's a lot more volatile. That means the fumes are a whole lot stronger, and so they end up causing more problems. But alcohol is, isopropyl rubbing alcohol. You find a bottle of something. Beer doesn't work very well. But, just whatever you can find that is flammable, there's a lot of things that you can think of, all right? And then transport. Here's the thing. When you're in a grid down situation or there's no gas, supply chain problems, what are the chances that your vehicle just becomes a dud? Like, how long are you going to be able to use it for? And if you have an EMP, chances are your vehicle is going to be dead. Why? Because you need a computer to start it. Right? All of our new direct injection types of, this is not old carburetor days. If you have an old carburetor car, then you don't have that problem, all right? An EMP won't do anything to that type of vehicle prior to the 1980s, okay? So you can run those just fine. But chances are you don't have a 1967 Chevy whatever hanging out in your garage. You may, but what are you going to run it off? Unless you have a diesel conversion where you can run it off of cooking fuel. But, there's different things. Food. Do you have a garden? Do you have any access to fresh food whatsoever? How many people here garden? All right. You guys are in a good state. Right? And I don't mean Michigan. I mean, seeds, canned, preserved, dried, emergency processed food, hunting, fishing, refrigeration, preserving. These are all things that you need to consider. Food longevity. How long is it going to last on the shelf? All this kinds of stuff. Right? But here's the thing, you think about this stuff daily unless you eat out every day. Right, you guys think about refrigeration and preservation, I would imagine on a fairly common, occurrence here. Maybe you're not thinking about it for months or years, but you are thinking of it for days and weeks, right? And so all you have to do is when you're preparing for something, just think of longer term. That's it. The hope is that you don't have to bug out forever, but, all of these things to consider. Oh, and going back, do any of you guys have any skills? All right? Do you guys have any skills for fishing or planting or any of this kinds of stuff or canning, preserving, right? All that, I don't recommend setting up traps and catching the squirrel even though he bothers you, but there's skill set involved in a lot of things. All right? Yes. If you guys haven't become to lost skills, you guys are losing out. No, you need to be here. All this stuff, this is what lost skills is all about. Medicine, do you have training in first aid? Do you have a medical kit? Do you guys know, besides just how to put Band-Aids on and Neosporin, do you know anything else? And taking an Advil? Like, you need to know more than that, right? And so you can get free trainings almost anywhere. The Red Cross, and there's this place called YouTube. How does it? It's YOUTUBE. Oh, okay, yeah, YouTube, yeah, where you can get free almost everything. All right, so you can just watch videos on various types of just first aid classes, and that'll be good. You guys know what triage is too, right? Okay, I'm just going to assume some things. Natural remedies, right? Sometimes you don't have access to things, and sometimes natural remedies are actually better in some regards. All right, so everything has its place. Right? Now, if somebody needs surgery, right, they've been shot, don't put some lavender on it, but, there's places to use all of these things. And so it's good to know some natural remedies because you may be out in the neighborhood and there may be things that you can just pick off the street. Well, not off the street, but, off of somebody's yard or something like that, or your own yard, or anywhere around here. There's quite a few medicinal plants that are common that can be used for various things. And if you don't have access to stuff, well, it can become a lifesaver. So, obviously you have some medications, check the expiration date on those types of things. They'll have them. Medical equipment supply, do you have any of those? Training, medicinal gardens, all that kinds of stuff. All right, and obviously we get to security, and you guys, I'm blocking that. Nobody remembers where that's from, does it? No? I think it's Home Alone. Okay, location. Situation, access, exit, weapons, training. Oh, let me back up here. All right, security is a big thing. This is one that I think requires probably the most preparedness, because if you're in a situation where there's violence or there's mobs or there's even animals, whatever the case is, any security situation becomes where I think most people feel the least prepared, generally speaking. It takes the longest amount of time to feel confident in your ability to defend yourself and others. Right? Now, there's some people who are just naturally more built and strong and courageous and all that kinds of stuff, and they can handle, somebody who's somewhat trained just because they're naturally adept at that, but that is probably not most people. In most threatening situations, people feel at a loss, and that is probably where much or most of the panic happens. Like, why did that happen? Why was there a knife pulled on me, right? Why was there, somebody pulled, like, you don't know how to respond when there's violence. Like, we're just not trained in that. And when people become aggressive, and not necessarily just violence, but verbally aggressive, right? Threatening. You know, how do you de-escalate? How do you do those types of things? And so this is something that, you know, if you're not a police officer, if you're not somebody that trains, you know, regularly in martial arts or in the military or stuff like that, you have to begin to assess your risk in this area from a kind of different perspective, right? What are the most potential things for me, right? Sometimes home invasion, right? So how do I prepare for home invasions, right? Because when you're the defender, you have the upper hand, right? If you're prepared, you know, and I'm not going to talk about ethics here because everybody has different views on how to respond to those. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just saying that you need to begin to assess yourself within these various contexts, all right? If you do feel comfortable with weapons, do you know how to use them? Because there's a lot of people who say, well, I want a gun for defense, but then they end up shooting themselves because they don't know how to use them, right? They cause more problems than they solve because they don't actually, you know, and it can cause accidents or children have access to them. So I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just saying that if you are going to choose a path, make sure that you know how to use it, you feel confident and comfortable around it, and you understand, you know, when and where and all that kinds of stuff. And obviously, you know, I leave prayer there because I do believe that there's a very spiritual aspect to all of this. And you need to have some level of trust in something greater than yourself. Because you're not going to have that peace, you're not going to have that assurance, you're always going to be freaking out if you're always thinking about there's somebody out to get you. And we're not here to talk about a boogeyman. We're here to give you scenarios, but at the same time, give you some level of assurance that there's, just because you don't have control over it doesn't mean it can be out of control. Most things in our life, right, we don't have necessarily control over, but that doesn't mean that we need to freak out about them and panic. That we have some level of trust that things are going, you know, and obviously if you've committed yourself to God, then you're in a different situation as well. Hygiene, we talked about this, all right. Personal cleanliness, environmental conditions, waste disposal, right? We talked about, you know, hazardous materials is kind of a very different type of situation. Most of us are not really kind of trained for that, but let's say that there was a meltdown at the nuclear power plant. Let's say we had another Chernobyl, right? That's very possible, or Fukushima, right? That is, you know, you can have radioactive waste, right? And that'll give you cancer in 2 seconds flat, amongst a slew of other things. And it gets into everything very quickly. So are there ways that you know how to dispose of things that have had contamination? And it goes beyond just contamination from nuclear waste, but other types of hazardous materials, poisons, toxic stuff, sludge, you know, sewers. You know, if you fall into a sewage pipe, or you have to escape through a sewage pipe, and you have open wounds, like, you know, there's things that you need to consider. And finally, we come to money, right? This is the last one on the list. And so we have, you know, what are current values, of course, but those may change. The value of the dollar today may not be the value in a survival situation. Nobody may want your money at all, at least not your paper. But if it has some other practical use, if it's like a silver dollar or something like that, maybe it still maintains some level of value. All right, so fungibility, like I was talking about easier. How easy is it to exchange, right? So you've got cash, you've got precious metals and jewelry, and you know, jewelry can actually appreciate in value. Certain types of watches, Rolexes, and that kind of, there's a lot of people, rich people, they buy Rolexes instead of gold, right? Because the Rolexes will increase in value, but the problem is you've got a Rolex that's worth $25,000 and you're just trying to buy a sandwich. Like, what are you going to do about it? You're just trying to get by. So it becomes very difficult to kind of, you know, deal with some of these things. And unless you have a furnace where you can melt out that poor Rolex, but then you're better off with the gold because it's not, yeah, you understand. All right, and so I gave you this idea of heirloom seeds and bullets, and like I say, I'm not recommending the bullets. I'm just saying that these are all things to think about. And finally, if I haven't blown your mind already, there's tons of books that say 500 times more than what I was able to say today in various areas. These are the ones on survival, wilderness survival themselves, okay? Bushcraft 101, these are all books that I have, and I forgot, I was like, Did I forget something? Yeah, I forgot my library. I had like a bunch of books I was going to bring, and they're not all listed here, because if I just give you a list of 100 books, then what's that going to do, right? So these are 3 books that I could recommend, and this one, SAS Survival Handbook, is the first survival law book that I ever bought with my own money, and it's one of the best. It's one of the most well-rated, and it's a really, really good book, and it's really good if you're interested in survival types of things. And then finally, if you're kind of more grid down, then you have these types of things. The grid down situation, Prepper's Pantry. This kind of covers a lot of the stuff, especially in regards to kind of food preservation and just having things that I would struggle to do. Most of the things that we talk about, I can't afford to do. I can't. That's just my reality. I'm not in a situation where I can do most of the things, but what I can do is I can go through as much and understand my risk, understand my level of preparedness, so that when it happens, I'm not somehow surprised or shocked by it, right? And I haven't read this one, but I heard it was pretty well recommended. And then finally, these are some ones on kind of more general homesteading that'll cover a gamut of skills and just make you overall less dependent on the system, because in reality, what creates the greatest risk is over-dependency on modern things. Right? You have to understand that when a grid goes down or EMP or there's civil unrest, right, your phone, your car, your electricity, your everything, your access, you can't call people, you can't Google stuff, you can't YouTube anything, all of that stuff is out the window. And so it's easy for you to now to go and get the information that you want from the internet, but if there's no internet, where are you going to get the information from? How are you going to know what's happening, right? And so I think it makes a whole lot of sense for you to just, in whatever ways possible, right, with whatever means you have, to learn to be less dependent on centralized systems. Not that there's anything wrong per se, there's obviously pros and cons, and whoever's in power can change a whole lot of stuff, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, it doesn't hurt you to know how to live apart from all of the comforts and conveniences, that we have. Because here's one of the downsides, one of the big downsides of our modern world: weak and susceptible. That's what most people become to the elements, is weak and susceptible, right? And so, to the extent that you can avoid those things, avoid those things. I have some things that I printed out here, and I don't think I have enough, so I may print out some more. Did you make copies, or? Oh, you made a few copies? Okay. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to do a quick rundown of kind of an EMP situation. Yeah, let me... Okay. Because like I said, this is just an example of, you don't necessarily have to think of this as a checklist per se, but it's just as kind of like a hypothetical. And there's various different breakdowns. Did everybody give you one? Or you were, I don't even know what I'm doing. Guys, I'm running off of little sleep. Oh, there you go. All right. Does everybody have one?
How many more do we need?
And we'll get some to you if you don't have one.
I have a question or?
Yeah, sure.
Could you possibly make a list of these books and put them in order of priority if people were picking up one at a time?
Okay. Oh, wait, I forgot. You got more. So, I have way more books than these. I picked the 3 best that I could tell. I either read them and I really liked them, or they were highly recommended to me. I haven't read all of them, but I've read about half of them. So I've read at least one on each of these, but probably 2 on each of these that I'm recommending, and the other ones were just highly recommended by other people that I know. But it's not like I spend all my time reading survival books. That's not what I do. All right. I have all of these books. This is a phenomenal book that has been used by nonprofits working in various countries, missionaries working in various countries, military, all that kinds of stuff where there is no doctor, right? This is a book that people have been swearing by for a really, really, really long time, right? It's called austere medicine, and that is like when you're in the middle of nowhere and you got access to almost nothing, this is what you do, right? So this is really good stuff. I've not read this one. I've perused this one, right? And this one actually looked pretty interesting to me. I don't really know too much about that one, but it was highly recommended. And it comes to this one I've gone through, really great stuff. These are all similar. They're kind of like these large books with kind of a compilation of things. These aren't necessarily experts per se. These are people who just compile information and then give you kind of like an encyclopedia of as many types of things as they possibly can in regards to stuff. So it's good for reference, but I wouldn't use it necessarily as a guide. These in regards to the homesteading ones are more reference. This is pretty good, and it's actually fairly step by step, and it'll give you various scenarios. And then, like I said, I haven't read this one yet. And then when it comes to survival, this is my favorite, and this is my second favorite, and I haven't read that one, but I did purchase that one. So I could give you a list, but at the end of the day, there's no perfect book. They're all going to give you a little bit of something. But here's the thing: no matter which one you choose, it's going to give you more than what you have. Right? And here's the thing: you're going to come across people, even in the disaster preparedness or emergency response or survival or whatever you want to call it, with different approaches and views. And they're not necessarily right or wrong. They're just different approaches. All right? Like, let me give you an example in terms of mindset. So one of the guys that I became best friends with, I was a martial arts instructor, and he was a SEER instructor, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. They teach special forces how to survive, pilots how to survive when they fall behind enemy lines, and how to get out of there, how to deal with torture. It's considered the premier survival school in the military, right? Everybody who's anybody that does survival goes to SEER to learn how to survive, right? And this guy was a SEER instructor, and he had 300 acres in North Georgia. I was living in Georgia at the time. We became best friends. We exchanged. I taught him martial arts, hand-to-hand combat. He took me to his property and basically taught me. And the best thing was that even though he trained in SEER, he said SEER was nothing to him. He learned a whole lot more from his grandfather, who was Native American tracker. All right? So he says, I learned more from my grandpa, and I thought I was going to go to the military and learn something. He says, these guys were very different from what my grandpa taught me. All right? There's almost no Native American trackers left. It's a lost art. It's unfortunate, but it's gone. There's the last generations were just, I don't know if there's anybody left, to be honest. Anyway, one of the things he said is that his grandfather took him and some guys, and they were sitting in a forest, and they were looking at an ant pile. And there was these ants walking towards the ant pile. And then he called somebody to walk through the forest angry, to stomp right behind where this ant pile was. So the guy started walking and just kind of stomping nearby, and the ants changed the pattern by which they began to walk. And he waited a little bit, and he says, okay, I want you to come back a few minutes later. I want you to take a leisurely stroll as if you're enjoying the woods and all that kinds of stuff. And he did. And the ants resumed their normal walking patterns. He said that the old Native American trackers were able to tell where their prey was, where their quarry was, by listening to the differences in the animal calls. Because when there's a predator present, all of the prey, the birds and the squirrels and all that kind of stuff, they change their patterns and behavior. And so they could listen to what the birds and the squirrels and see what they're moving and say, oh, they're not moving normally because there's a predator most likely in that direction. They said that they were able to get within, a very accurate direction of where they could find that fox or coyote or whatever it is that they were looking for. And so what he was trying to say was that when you go to the military, you learn how to survive and you become really, really good at it. But the view of the military and most survival today is competition against it. When you look at the old ways and the Native Americans and all that kinds of stuff, their views on things was very different. That was their home. They weren't competing against nature. They were actually wanted to feel comfortable and belonging within that environment rather than saying that I'm going to, it's me against you kind of thing. Now, you could say that the military version of survival is wrong, but if you are a military expert or survival expert, you're going to stay alive for a very long time. And so it's just very different approach. I like to know a little bit about them both if I could, right? As I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but in certain situations, one may be better or more applicable. In other situations, another one may be more, you're not going to live in the forest, chances are. And so Native American strategy might work, but it also, you may just need to learn how to get out really quick, right? So, like I said, you're always going to find different perspectives, and it's not like it's necessarily right or wrong. It's just something that you can learn from. And so I can't say which is the best or anything like that. It's just a different perspective. And if you want more lists of books, I can give you more lists of books. I just don't know if it'll be helpful. But I chose 3 good ones that I knew were good from each of those categories, and that's just a place to start. So just choose one. You're not going to necessarily go wrong. Yeah.
I wanted to share with everybody what originally got us interested in this is we happened to read a book called 1 Second Late.
1 second after.
1 second after.
Okay.
And I don't have the author, but it was fiction, quote unquote, story of an EMP happening.
Yeah.
And it illustrates in fictionalized terms, in very real terms, what happens to society. And you'll so much more appreciate all of this other stuff.
Yes.
If you realize, and it's very real. I mean, it's
Yeah.
great. So.
I think we're at a place where we're at a very real, and I wouldn't call it reasonable in a reasonable way, but reasonably possible, plausible risk of having this type of situation happen in the near future. Whether that's a hack with no EMP, which would leave certain types of technology unaffected, or whether it is EMP. And remember, when an EMP happens, do you know what goes out? Everything. Your flashlight with batteries go out. Batteries are immediately drained. So who cares if you had a battery or something? Like, it doesn't matter. If it's not in a Faraday cage, you've lost it. And we're going to talk about Faraday cages and all that kinds of stuff. So here's one example we're going to go through. EMP happens. What are some things that you would do step by step? We're going through kind of a scenario. All right? And this starts with the kind of this idea that you're not home. You're at work or you're at school or you're somewhere and you need to get home. It just happens during the middle of the day. All right? So what is the first thing that you do? You get home, right? All right? Why? Because chaos is bound to ensue soon after an EMP happens. But here's the thing. One of the things that this is assuming is that your car is still working. But I'm going to tell you how your car can still work. You do have to spend some money. You can go online and you can find an EMP protector for your car that's about $300. I know that it's, Read the reviews, yes, because there's only like 2 brands that are worth it and the rest of them are absolute junk. There's only one brand that I would recommend, but I think I like to say 2 because there's always something that's out there. I just don't know what the other one is.
What brand is that?
Let me find it for you. I'll get it back to you. I'll get back to you with that in just a second. Let's go through this and then I'll give you that one. I thought I would have had a little bit more time to make a list of stuff, but then I was like, I'm just going to give a list of them, the stuff to buy that can be depressing. All right. Yeah, so if your car is still working, obviously get your family, try to go home. Buy supplies. Well, you know what? If you haven't already, chances are it's going to be very difficult. But let's say something does happen and you have the ability to stop at the store on the way. Do it sooner rather than later, all right? Because once it starts picking up, then the disorder also increases with time, all right? And that's what you want to just grab it, don't think too much, get what you need, and get out if you can, all right? Check for electrical fires. EMPs fry electrical devices, which can result in fires. Check your home. Look for embers. Also check your neighborhood. This is when you want to know where your electrical box is. You want to be able to turn your breakers off, all that kinds of stuff. Just because, the EMP took all the power out. No. Residual. Just turn it off for safety, right? You don't want anything that could become a liability or a danger later on. Of course, check for things that are scorched and power lines, down to power lines, all of that kinds of stuff. check your electronics. Ideally, you will have protected most of your precious electronics ahead by storing them in Faraday bags. And you guys know what Faraday bags are?
No clue.
Okay. So Faraday bags are basically metal woven into fabric so that it creates a 100% enclosed in metal bag. It's very thin. Oftentimes they'll use silver or other types of things that block EMF and EMR, all right? Electromagnetic frequencies, all right? Or electric-magnetic radiation. That's EMF and EMR. So you want something, and silver has generally been used as the best. So it's not always, but silver woven through normal fabric, and you need to have a 100% coverage. That's what protects it from electromagnetism. It has to be 100% surrounded by metal. All right, you can actually make a Faraday cage for $50 to store most of your stuff. And you guys, well, was it the Cookie Monster or Oscar? Who was in the trash can at Sesame Street? Oscar. Okay. You know that metal trash can he's in? That's your Faraday cage because it's 100% metal. Grab one of those, and I think they're about $50, all right? Get some metal tape and put it on the inside of the rim so that when you put it, it has 100% contact. You don't want any spaces where it's not contact, because you know metal it'll bend or something like that. You want it completely sealed, and also shine a light through the bottom to make sure that all the seams are also welded. You want to make sure that 100% metal coverage. Get the tape, fix all of the seams. That is your Faraday cage. Put some cardboard on the inside. Put your battery charger, put your batteries, put some power tools, put those batteries and those power chargers in there, put your flashlights in there, put an extra set of unused telephones in there, right? Radios, anything in that trash can that you can fit that is electronic, put it in there, close it, leave it. Anything happens, you're going to have something that you can use. Batteries that are usable, radios that are usable, flashlights that are usable, all tools that are usable, all that kinds of stuff. And it didn't cost you an arm and a leg to get it. But you can buy dedicated Faraday backpacks, right? Or briefcases, or purses, or wallets, or things like that. And carrying those types of things beyond protecting you from RFID, which, by the way, most of your credit cards are RFID, right? And your passport cards and the brand new driver's licenses, they're all RFID. You can actually you can block that radiation as well. So, because people can steal identities by copying RFID frequencies with these little devices that I'm not too familiar about because I don't steal stuff, but you know, there's ways of doing it. So, and it's not expensive to get, but you can get a Faraday pack for your laptop and fit your phone and your iPad and whatever else that you need to, and just keep them there. When you're sleeping, it's a good thing not to keep your phone by your face. It'd be nice if you had a little Faraday pouch in your drawer, your little nightstand next to your bed. You put it in there because then those waves from that phone are not affecting your brain waves during sleep, and you can get better rest. And if something happens at night, you still are the only person who gets to wake up and use your phone. All right? So it's a win-win. Right? Protect yourself and also prepare yourself. So Faraday, F-A-R-A-D-A-Y. Go look on Amazon. You will find tons of Faraday stuff. And as always, reviews, but also take it with a grain of salt because there's people who also pay for reviews. And give free stuff to get good reviews. And so just do your due diligence, and remember, there's nothing perfect, but yeah. So check your electronics. We already talked about that. Do not drink tap water. Purify first. Water treatment plants may not operate. We also covered this. Here's the thing. Storage, right? We talked about water storage. Fill your bathtubs immediately. You got a bathtub? Emergency happens. Before anything goes bad, plug your bathtub. Well, maybe you want to wash it a little bit because there might be some grime there. But, fill it up. Fill it up. Huh?
So your hot water heater too.
Yeah. And so you've got those containers that are there, right? And so you may need to use that water. Maybe that'll be for hygiene, or that'll be for cooking, or that'll be for something. So take advantage of that. That's basically like your watering hole in your house. So just, this is creative stuff. It doesn't require a lot. Your bathtub's already there. All right?
Curiosity question.
Yes.
Just like if you have your gallons of distilled water or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or you reuse them and you fill them up, do we know how long that lasts, or what do you think on that?
How long the water lasts?
Well, yeah, in the plastic.
Okay, so with distilled water, nowhere near as long, because distilled water has nothing in it, and things move from high saturation to low saturation. So whatever is in the plastic, and usually those gallon plastics are BPA and have got a whole bunch of other types of microplastics that can leach into your water. And if it's not a mineralized water, like distilled water is not, then all of those plastics, those hormone disruptors that exist within plastics, those BPAs and all that kinds of stuff, they're in your water very soon. Because things move from higher concentration to lower concentration, and distilled water has the lowest concentration. All right? So that's just the way that it works. The distilled water will pull from that plastic more. Now, if it's a saturated water, like mineralized water, right, or spring water, it'll last longer within that plastic bottle. The other thing to think about is in those types of plastics, is it being in a place where you have a fluctuation of light and dark or a fluctuation of hot and cold? Because if you do, that also can change the way things are. Water is something that is called a memory element. What it means is that the molecules of water change in accordance with whatever substrate it's touching. So if it stays in whatever thing for long, it begins to mimic that. Water in plastic for prolonged periods of time, especially when you're heating and cooling in light and dark and all that kinds of stuff, begins to mimic the plastic structurally. There were tests that were done a long time ago in a German laboratory where they took water, they put it in a beaker, and then they took that beaker and they put it in a vial of poison. Now the water had no direct contact with the poison, but after leaving it there for a set period of time, they took it out, they tested the water was clean. But then they gave it to rats and the rats died. Because the water molecule began to restructure itself into the poison molecule in terms of its shape, organizational structure. So when you test the water is completely clean, right? But all of a sudden it's mimicking this poison. And you can look it up. And you know, I've studied a number of things, and some things I'm like, really? Is that? Eh. Here's the thing. You want, to the extent possible, to store things in glass. That's always been the best. However, glass is not easily transportable. Glass breaks. If you have an earthquake, all your glass is gone, right? So there's obviously downsides to it. In terms of safe for drinking, the best is glass. Then you have other things that you can do, and that's high-grade food steel, right? Food-grade steel. You can try some great, BPA, and now BPA is not the only one. They have BPBs, BPSs, I'm thinking of something else. They have a few other BP somethings. There's 3 other ones that they just came out with, and they say, oh, look, BPA free. But they just found various ways of changing the bisphenols, right? It's still a bisphenol, but it's, anyways. Finding really high-quality food-grade plastics in terms of level of longevity, compromise between level of longevity, safety, and ability to transport without breakage and all that kinds of stuff may also be a good option. All right? So I feel like you guys ask these questions, I have too many answers for you. Do what you can. Do what you can. Whatever you have, just use it. If you have those old plastic ones, drink them sooner rather than later. But if you had an option, just refilter them. Just refilter them. And I know that plastics don't necessarily come out through most filters, but just do something. If you're going to die because of dehydration, there's levels of bad, and you just want to be on the lesser level of bad. That's all really it is, There's nothing ideal in a survival situation. Nothing is ideal. So just work with what it is that you have.
I think another component that's really important is what am I going to do for the 1-minute solution, what am I going to do for the 1-day solution, the 1-week solution, the 1-year solution.
Yeah.
So for the very short time scales, get out of danger, get back home. Then can you make it a week to the next thing? You might not be eating for that week, but you got to drink, you got to have some of these basics.
Right.
And then a couple of slides later, you had the food preparation. So that's for the year-long situation.
Yeah.
And like regarding the water, you have the 80%, I have to just store it in milk jugs and get BPA, then I'll be getting this hit of BPA that's better than starving, and my glass bottle's broke anyway. So
yeah.
you do what you can with decent tools. that's the first step. And then longevity here and of
Yeah.
course, we'll-
In survival, the thing that we use the most is metal. And the reason why is because we can heat it. We don't have to change the container to boil it. Oftentimes we can boil it in whatever it is, and we can reuse it for making tea. We can reuse it for making soup with whatever we find. So metal, I think, is the most flexible of them all. And, but it's hard to find large metal containers. So for prolonged in your home, chances are you're not going to get metal. But for survival, something smaller, I would recommend, finding like a stainless steel, or even aluminum is fine, or titanium if you got the money. But make sure that it's something that you can use over a fire, because there are certain metal tools or pots, stuff like that, not pots, but water containers that they say they recommend not to because they're too thin or whatever. So just make sure that it's something that you can heat. But yeah, different things for different situations. Use what you can. All right? And you can actually heat water in plastic too, but you got to be super, super careful how you do that. But there's ways to do that. But good luck what you're doing to your system there. But if it keeps you alive, then who cares, right? Hand crank, solar-powered weather radio, or ham radio. You guys heard of ham radio? Okay. You're not allowed to talk on ham radio, but you can listen unless it's emergency. Check your vehicles and hide those that work. All right, check all vehicles, ATVs, RVs, blah, blah, blah. I already told you guys that about this system. I'll share that system with you guys in just a second to protect your vehicles. There's another easy way to protect all of that stuff. And that other easy way to protect everything is to win the lottery and build a massive bunker 50 feet underground for about $30, $40 million, and just like all the other millionaires and billionaires are doing, and then you'll be good. So when you do, call me. I'll like to be your friend, and we can hang out. All right, shelter in place until you have more information. All right, oftentimes when you make hasty decisions, you make dumb ones. You do want to be able to think on your feet and make quick decisions, because sometimes making too slow of a decision can also backfire. But if you don't have experience, you don't want to just jump into stuff, right? If you're unsure about something, don't just run into things. So just take a little break. And the same thing in a survival situation. You don't immediately start walking. Oh, I'm going to get out of this forest. No, right? You stop. You just wait a little bit. You see, is this survival going to come or not? Rescue, I should say. Is rescue going to come or not? What are my chances? Let me think this through. Right? How did I get lost? How did I get here? You need to get your bearings straight. All right? Decide whether to bug out or bug in, or bug in and bug out. And that's the same thing. When you come to a conclusion, reasonable conclusion, and all you're doing is weighing your options. There's no 100%. It's just weighing your options, right? And then gather emergency gear or food. Start rationing, right? This is super important, especially in survival situations. Don't assume that you're just going to find more later. If you do, woohoo! But so many times people have just run out because they're like, oh, I'm hungry now, I'm going to eat it now, I'm going to get more later. Just don't do that. You're always better off. Don't gamble, right? Don't gamble. Your life isn't a casino, right? Your life is extremely valuable. You lose it, you've lost it. You can't get it back. So ration your food. Ration your food, ration your water. Know how much you need to get through each day, all right? If there's radiation pills that you can buy, and those are very easy to find. You can find them on Amazon, right? They're not those potassium pills, all right? And then when it comes to hygiene, if you don't have access, dig a hole for your waste, right? Have a shovel, have those types of things, and then build your defenses, all right? And that's once the thing. That's something that's personal, and I'm not going to give you advice on what to do with your defenses and all that kinds of stuff, but just something to consider. All right, Q&A. I know that was a lot. Your heads are probably like, why did I come here today? All right, Q&A, questions. Any questions?
Well, I had a couple, but
Yeah, go for
I
it.
don't remember. Somebody started asking.
We didn't get to the car and all that kinds of stuff. This is something that my friend keeps in his basement. He's an old military vet, Army vet, and he just has these, and he's made a bunch of them, and he just keeps these in his basement. And this is basically a bunch of products that he bought as a bug out bag, and they're all brand new. They've never been used. stuff in there. He's got a military survival guide, the Army's survival guide in there. And so, obviously you need some information on how to use them. And so he's got his survival guide in there. He's got, his lights. He's got emergency blankets. And he's got a tent and a sleeping bag and extra batteries and just a whole bunch of stuff that he just put together. And he's got like 4 or 5 of them in his basement. And if he needs to leave, he's not going through his shelves and getting all this kinds of stuff. He's just got them for all of his family members. They toss them in their car if their car is still working, and they go. Or if he's got to go hiking, right? It's not a duffel bag, it's something that he can carry. Obviously his kids probably wouldn't, but he's military, so he's kind of conditioned himself to ruck, right? To carry heavy stuff. So you're allowed to go through that if you want. This is what we call a 3-day pack, and this is a minimal 3-day pack. This is probably a 1-day pack for most people. But this is what is considered a 3-day assault pack. And I like military stuff because, can you tell, does this backpack look super used to you?
Used?
Yeah, does it look like it's really worn out?
No.
You know how old it is?
5 years old.
20.
Is it military?
Mm-hmm. I paid $150 for it 20 years ago. It's a lot of money for a backpack. But I've only had one backpack in 20 years, so it's not a lot of money.
And you have used that?
I have used it for over a year in Africa. Right? I've used it in Afghanistan. I've used it in various countries in South America, in Asia. I've been to more than 25 countries with this backpack. All right? It has been used and abused and all this kinds of stuff, and it looks almost like the day that I bought it. It is thick, and it is uncomfortable. And it has poor organization, but it works. You can't have it all. It's okay.
What is your background?
What is my background?
You've been to all these countries, and are you military?
No. So I wanted to join military, but I wanted to do college first and then go in as an officer. So I did martial arts for 10 years. Then I got involved in some, I guess you could say, mission work. I lived in Africa with a friend of mine who was building an orphanage there. He's like, hey, you want to come live with me in Africa? And we were in Kenya, and the Masai Mara is like in the Serengeti type of place. So he was living in the animal park, right, where traditional tribes. So I went and I lived with him for a year, and we were building this orphanage, just the 2 of us in a shack. And at that time, we took a 1-month trip to Sudan near the border with the Congo in the middle of the jungles of nowhere, and I met this 8-year-old girl that was married to a 40-year-old man. And it bothered the living daylights out of me. I came back to the States. I got involved in counter-trafficking. Some friends and I, we started a 24-hour call center for victims of human trafficking. I started working with law enforcement, started working with FBI, started working with the Department of Homeland Security. We were contracted to train the Department of Homeland Security on how to establish counter-trafficking provisions within the United States. I saw that it ended up becoming a joke. They already had their own ideas. They weren't actually looking to cooperate with us. I ended up going overseas, working on my own, interacting with various nonprofits, doing some things with them, doing some things on my own, but it led to a series of various events that just had me every which way in all types of situations, very austere types of situations, and some of the craziest places, up in the Himalayas of Afghanistan to, the most dangerous slums of Brazil to, places in Turkey and Asia and all that kinds of stuff. So I was everywhere in about a span of about 10 years. I was in about 33 countries, doing a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time, and it wore the living daylights out of me. I probably ran my body into the ground, but I was young, so I was able to handle it just a little bit. So I have a plethora of various experiences that are kind of combined. I've worked with people from all of those backgrounds. I have friends in all of those backgrounds: military, law enforcement, survival, all that kinds of stuff, and I needed to learn as much from them within each of those contexts so that I could survive in all the places that I was planning on going. But unfortunately, my body couldn't keep up, so I wasn't able to go to all the places that I'd hoped to. But I still have a lot, and so I'm just trying to help people to be able to deal with as many various scenarios as they can. And so when you've been in as many, you think of a whole lot. So I'm good at thinking up various scenarios. There's no shortage of creativity in that regard. So yeah, that's the shortest I can give you of my general background. Yeah. So, and this is my tub in my car. It needs to be better, but, I have, obviously, tire inflator, ball inflator, air mattress inflator, which probably the worst invention on the planet is an air mattress. But this is just, I think everybody should have something in their car. And I didn't have this or whatever, and I just keep this tub in the back of my car. And it's just a series of various things that I keep. Obviously I've got a hat. I've got my wool blanket from Afghanistan. It's very nice. I've used it for everything. Handy. I've got my little axe, and it's got a little saw in there that comes out. So it's those tools there. Probably one of the greatest things in the world. Roll of 6 to 10 mil plastic. Trash bags will save your life, but this will save it quicker because it's tougher. I can make a floor covering out of it. I can make a boat out of it. Yeah, I can make a boat out of this. Yes, I can. You can make a really quick shelter out of it, water catchment system out of it. I can make a poncho out of it. I can make almost anything. I can make a sail if I need to get off an island with it. All right, this is really good. This is really, 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 really good. And so this is a pretty thick one, and so I just keep the whole roll in there. I've got this. It's a kukri, which is kind of an old Nepalese Gurkha kukri. It's their form of the machete, and it was used by the Nepalese Gurkha, which were military. And so this is kind of got a teardrop point, but forward curvature, so that even though it's smaller than a machete, you can kind of get that extra oomph in the strike. So it's good for chopping. It's good. You can slice enough things. You can carve things. It's small enough, and you can protect yourself against the bear, I suppose, if you know how. All right, I've got some, I prefer to sleep on these, and these are 2 hammocks. And these can also turn into a various series of things. I can turn these into sails as well, or shelters, or different types of stuff. And I've got those just because there might be extra people. Oh yeah, I've got 3 of them, I bet. There's 3 people in my family. This is a jet boil stove and extra pot. So this is a little stove that comes in. It's got a little container that you can use, and then the stove is inside there, so it kind of conceals. Huh? It's the little small kind of camping. I think it's propane. I'm not sure it's propane. It might be butane. Fuel canisters. Yeah, I haven't. To be honest with you, I've never used it because I just like starting fires. Every time I go camping, I just start a fire. But it's there if I need it. That's why I keep it in my car because, and another lifesaver that you will need, Gorilla Tape. Not just any type of duct tape, Gorilla Tape. Because I have met some people that were rafting class 4 and 5 rapids in Peru, and they got a puncture in their raft, and they patched it with this, and they made it to the end. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. So, and they even have waterproof versions now. Yeah, they have ones that are actually rated to patch actual pipes, pressured pipes. Yeah. So, bags for maps, for phones, for cameras, for things that these are water sealable, completely sealable, right? This is my camping filter, if I could see it. This is my water filter. This is my camping filter. It has the Nalgene stuff, so this is one of those. This is extra pots with utensils inside, because sometimes you don't want to eat out of the pot that you're cooking in, and so it's good to have an extra one, or you want to make different things, maybe one for tea, one for soup, one for something else. I've got a little tin with biodegradable soap, wire, fishing line, fishing weights, some foil, old school compass. Right. Do you guys, anybody know how to use a compass? Most people these days don't. They use GPS for everything. Well, good luck when that goes down. Huh? GPS will not work with EMP. You have to be careful. you have to be careful because it's possible, and I haven't thought of this until you mentioned it, but it's possible that even compasses can be thrown awry by the magnetic fields created by EMPs. I've not tested it myself, but it just kind of came to my mind as a possibility. However, if you have it, this is a completely sealed metal container, so it could function as a partial Faraday cage. So this could probably protect it from that, which, is the hope. But,
Yeah, along that line, I heard you say about having a EMP, Faraday bag.
Yes.
For your phone, say
Yes.
again? You said if EMP hit, you'd be the only one who could call.
So not necessarily. What I meant that is that your friends and family won't. But don't assume that you're the only person that has made those preparations. And there's other things that you can do with your phone, like GPS. The EMP doesn't knock out the satellites.
Oh,
Yeah, but the
okay.
question is
The signal towers,
Yes.
yeah, I don't know. But a functioning phone can have its uses. And so, and we don't know if somebody has towers that are protected, because I'm sure, military or they may have certain things that they bring out during emergencies, and they may have a backup system of sorts. I'm not familiar with what all those are, but I'd rather have the ability to use something than to have it completely useless, right? And if I end up turning it on and not doing anything, then okay, then I haven't lost anything anyway, right? So,
that's the,
So,
I was about to say that's the advantage with ham radios.
Yes.
Because they have little handy talkies that are, walkie-talkie size, and you can go station to station with those. You don't need an intermediary with that.
yeah.
And that's the 2 liter.
Now, did you have a tent in there at all?
I had a few other things in there, but,
Oh, yeah,
but no,
yeah,
not a
well,
tent.
but
This is my tent.
If you're in an emergency,
Yeah.
that's, the FAA is not gonna come after you for,
Here's the thing. If I'm bugging out and I've got to go somewhere, it would be nice to have a tent. But here's the thing. Have you noticed the color of camping gear? Orange, blue. It's all bright neon colors. It's visibility because you want to be visible in a survival situation, right? Not an emergency situation. Depending, you may want to be invisible. Here's the thing. If I want to be visible, I can be visible of my own accord. If I want to be invisible, I would prefer something that can make me invisible. And wearing bright colors is not that. And so I don't normally buy bright colored tents and those types of things. I'll try to get olive drab green or black or something that I think can blend a little bit better. But I generally like to make my own shelters. And making your own shelter without plastic isn't bad. But making it with plastic, you can make a pretty nice shelter. You can protect yourself from quite a bit of stuff and feel fairly comfortable. Because I make them with leaves and you sleep on leaves and all that kinds of stuff. But when you've got plastic, you can actually protect yourself from a lot of that stuff and you feel a little bit cleaner and all that kinds of, But you'll find out, and I hope that you guys can make it to the shelter building thing, but you'll find out that it actually takes a minute to build it. But if you have one of these, you can build it in probably a third of the time than it would take you otherwise. And so maybe we'll do that. We'll have a competition. You guys in teams of 5 will have to build a shelter for 2 people within 3.5 hours, and I'll see if I can build one for 2 people by myself just using this tarp. But the same methods, same type of shelter. So that'll be curious. I'll be curious to see if that's doable. But we'll find out. Martha's looking at me out of the corner of her eye saying, "You've gone way over your time. I feel the stare." All right.
Where do you find the 10 mil plastic?
That, Home Depot or Lowe's. Yeah, it's just, you go to the painting section where they have like the painting tarp that you lay down. That's where you find it.
so a question about your kit that you've got there, would you qualify that more as a vehicle bug out kit then?
Yeah, it's just like this it's not even a full kit. It's just stuff that I've randomly thrown in there because I didn't want to spend any money. So it was just stuff that I had in my basement, that I knew that I could use, that I wanted access to, because if I'm at home and I need it, my car's there. But if I'm not at home and I need something, I don't want to have to be able to, I don't want to need to have to go, a long
Well,
distance to get it.
The reason that I ask that is because is like the kit that I keep in my car,
Yeah.
it's more of like a 3-day, if you get stranded in a snowstorm at the edge of the road,
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's knowing what I expect it to be able to do and not be able to do.
And that's it, the kit that you have in your car is 1,000 times more valuable than the one that's scattered around your house.
You mean you can, like I said, you can think through. This is the whole point of today's presentation was not to give you all of the answers, but to help you think through the various scenarios that you are most likely to go through and say, okay, how do I make an assessment of this? How do I assess my risk and what would I need, right? So you create the kit with knowledge as opposed to always being given a list. That's why I hesitated to give people a list. I'm like, okay, that makes it easier. Everybody wants a list, but how am I really preparing them with that, right? If I do all the legwork for you, and then it doesn't match your situation, right?
Well, and seeing that, I was happy to see that because it gives me the idea of having, if I have to evacuate the area and I don't know how long I'm gonna be out, I'm gonna want a tent, I'm gonna want some
Yeah,
of those things.
yeah.
But that's not necessarily stuff that I keep, in my everyday car kit, blanket and water and.
Yeah. And another thing, there's other things that I want to put in there. I want to get some, I didn't buy these because I thought it would look weird me buying them, but it's super useful. Is I want to buy a bunch of pantyhose and put them in there. Super useful. You can make filters out of them. You can make nets for catching fish out of them. You can do so much with some of these chapstick. I forgot chapstick. Like there's all these small things that you normally take for granted that make a really big difference in a survival situation.
Fire.
Just a couple.
Oh.
That's why you would have
It-
it just to cover your lips.
No. It's petroleum based. Yeah.
Fire starter.
Yeah, and long candles, right? That's another thing that you want, unscented candles. I didn't talk about that. Almost every survival situation will make life better if you have candles that you can use, and just there's a lot of stuff. One thing that I do, Altoids tin, I take those, and when you pull the little thing from your dryer and it's got this big thick roll of, take that, roll it up, compress it, put it in your Altoids can, and you can fit that almost in any pocket in your car or in your backpack, and that right there is tinder that'll light in almost any situation. So there's a lot of just really simple stuff that you can do that's
You can
done.
do a whole different class on just,
That's the thing is like,
innovative uses of normal things like the pantyhose,
so we'll have a class on pantyhose, guys. We'll see how the 100 uses for pantyhose will be our next lost skills class. So, all right, Martha, I'm done.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. And I want to let you know, there are several things that he touched on today that we've been teaching here in our class. We've been doing canning, we've been doing gardening, we've been doing, there was something else. Oh, herbs. A pantry, how to stock up your pantry. We have done natural remedies and herbs. That was in January this year, and all of those things are on on your half-sheet flyer, and if you don't have one yet, Alice can have them ready for you as you go out. At the bottom, it says how to find them. You just Google Lost Skills Edwardsburg, and it brings up our webpage, and you just go right to it on there. So, yeah, most of those are all filmed, so you should be able to do it. Now, we have a real quick drawing, and I'll let you draw one. Oh. Oh, good. He's our sound guy in there. So he gets one of these.
Cindy Cass.
Oh, Cindy. She just got back from Florida at 1 o'clock today and came in. One more.